After a week off, we're back with Fight Nights. And yeah, this is an interesting main event. Hernandez and Strickland. I like the co-main event. You know, we didn't talk about it. I'm going to ask you, obviously, for other fights in this card.
Yeah, on the prelims, couple interesting fighters. Jordan Levitt, Phil Rowe, Punahele Soriano, Ode Osborne, Chidi and Jokawani, all, exciting fighters, all fighting people I've never heard of, though. So, tune in for the prelims for those. And then obviously on the undercard, which you had just shown, Michel Pereira versus Zach Reese.
Yes.
Pereira's always exciting in his fights. Serghei Spivac versus Ante Delija, heavyweight fight, so could be really bad or good. And then Dan Ige versus Melquizael Costa. Tough fight for Dan Ige, but he's a tough guy. So
yeah, like see Dan Ige getting the win column.
All right, let's get in this co-main event though. This is these two fights are very good. This co-main kind of flying under the radar. So Geoff Neal versus Uros Medic.
Yeah, Uros Medic, 12-3, 10 KOs, 2 subs, 6-3 in the UFC. This guy has won 3 out of the last 4, including 2 in a row. He's never been into a decision in his career, win or lose. In his pro career, no decisions. This guy is all finishes. Performance of the night twice. Geoff Neal, 16-7, take 10 KOs, 2 subs, 4 decisions. Geoff has lost 3 out of his last 4, but you look at that a little closer, it's Carlos Prates, it's Ian Gary, it's Shavkat Rakhmonov. It's basically the top 3 pretty much young lions in his division that are already top contenders. Geoff's got we talk about strength of schedule all the time, and Geoff is definitely way more on that strength of schedule. He's got wins over Ponzinibbio, Vicente Luque, RDA. I had this in my notes. I forgot to put it down. It doesn't matter. I can tell you because I've watched enough Geoff Neal fights. This will be interesting. I'm going to go Geoff Neal, not just for strength of schedule, but just when I examine these two of the fighters, they're both explosive and they like to bring it. And I feel like that's going to favor Geoff Neal, who I think hits a little bit harder. And I'm going to go with Neal, TKO round 2, because these guys don't seem to like to go to decision.
Yeah, I like where you're at here. Medic caught by Punahele Soriano, who we just mentioned is going to be on the prelims January of last year, but he's been dominating guys in the first round too. Not just all finishes, but a lot of these finishes are in the first round as well. So he got a big win in November over kickboxer Muslim Salikov. That was his most impressive win by far. I'm a fan, but Geoff Neal, very tough stylistic matchup. I think Geoff's going to have a large speed advantage. He has great footwork, great head movement. So I think he makes Medic miss and then punishes him for it. So I'm with you. I'm going to go Geoff Neal by TKO in round 2. Excited for that fight, though.
Yeah, no, stylistic. I saw that fight. I said that might be fight of the night, actually.
It could be, but this one also very strong contender. Sean Strickland versus Anthony Hernandez.
Strickland, 29-7, 11 KOs, 4 subs, 14 decisions. He's won 4 out of his last 6. His only losses are to DDP, and those were both middleweight title fights when DDP was middleweight champion. Strickland has had fight of the night 1 time, performance of the night 3 times. Hernandez, 15-2-1, 3 KOs, 9 subs, 3 decisions. Performance of the night 4 times. Also, I like this stat. Most takedowns landed in UFC middleweight division history. That is interesting because, boy, Strickland has a great takedown defense. So that is going to be interesting here. Hernandez is on an 8-fight win streak. 6 of those fights are finishes. All right. And people going to decision with him are guys like Brendan Allen. So super tough fights. Ultimately, I like Hernandez by decision. I think he's going to do what Strickland does. I think he's going to put the pace on Strickland. I think it's going to be a hell of a pace for 5 rounds, but I think Hernandez is better. Well, I don't know if he's necessarily better on his hand. We're going to find that out, but I do think he's better. If it does go to the ground, that's a big if, though. Like we said, we talk about Strickland's ability to keep fights, standing. But one thing that's interesting to me that we haven't talked about is Strickland hasn't fought since February 9th of last year. This is a guy who loves to be active. He's had a lot of time away after especially losing those 2 title fights. It'll be interesting to see which Strickland we see. Will this be a guy who's recovered in a great headspace, ready to go? Or, is this maybe somebody on the tail end? Might not matter because Hernandez is just that good and has all this momentum. I like the fact that Hernandez is the busier the fighter, especially when we're talking about keeping up a great pace. I'll go Hernandez by decision because unlike the previous co-main event, these two guys are hard to finish.
Yeah, very interesting fight. I really think it just comes down to who can grind the other guy out with their cardio and pressure. So Sean uses striking, like you said, and great takedown defense with those teep kicks and stuff. Fluffy Hernandez uses grappling. He's the middleweight Marab, you know. I'm with you though. I'm gonna go with Fluffy. I can see it going the distance, but it's tough. Sean's never been submitted before, but I really want to pick Fluffy by submission.
Helps me.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna pick Fluffy by submission. I'll say round 4, late in the fight, they grind each other down. I'm interested to see what Sean looks like if he has to fight going backwards. Because he's never the one going backwards. So Fluffy, I think, can fight going backwards because those takedowns are easier if someone's coming forward at you. I think Sean will have a harder time with his game plan if he's the one going backwards. So I'm going to say submission round 4 for Fluffy. And I think he puts Sean out because I don't see Strickland tapping either. So I think he chokes him unconscious.
I was really looking back. I don't remember Strickland really getting finished other than Alex Pereira, where he decided to do the pace.
I think when he was at welterweight, for a while. I think he got finished there a couple times, you know, cutting too much weight probably.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a tough guy to get out of there. And, you know, I was looking around. The smart money seems to be, I don't know about a smart money, but most people seem to be picking Hernandez, you know. But like, I guess the one interesting thing is, though, too, if you know, Sean can keep it on the feet the whole time and really push his game plan. You know, you never know. But I'm with you. I'm going to go Hernandez. It's funny you said that. I was thinking about going Hernandez by submission. I was going to go round 4 too, but ultimately Sean just hasn't been submitted. So I went the opposite, and I'm going Hernandez by decision.